Well, Bitcoin is pulling back from recent record highs, hovering just below $115,000 this morning. Polymarket, by the way, pricing in a 53% chance that Bitcoin dips below $100,000 by the end of the year. My next guest says this could be a combination of risk-off sentiment and seasonality, potentially weighing on crypto. Joining me now, Steven McClurg, Canary Capital founder and CEO, is joining me in the studio. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Julie.
So what do you think, below 100,000 by the end of the year?
I think it's entirely possible. We have a lot of great tailwinds that's pushing Bitcoin up, probably to about 140, 150,000. But it's highly possible that we see Bitcoin below 100,000 at some point, if not now, as in the next 30 days, or by the end of the year.
What is driving Bitcoin at this point, right? Because all this year, the narrative in the first half of the year was really all around regulation, loosening, people coming into the market, institutional adoption continuing. But now all that stuff is kind of behind us.
Exactly.
So now what?
Well, I mean, look, and if you think about it, a year ago, Bitcoin was in $40,000 range. So the fact that it's gone so high, so fast, 3x in the last year, is quite significant. So there is a bit of reversion to the mean here.
Gotcha. Okay. And the other thing that I find interesting about Bitcoin is, you know, in the earlier days, I guess, it was seen as sort of this thing that didn't correlate to anything. Mm-hmm. But now it seems like it is sort of a risk-on asset to some degree, right? And so we've seen some money coming out of it recently. So how should investors be thinking about it in that way and where it belongs in the portfolio?
Sure. Well, when I was in traditional finance, before people were heavily invested in things like cryptocurrencies, we looked at what correlated to inflation. And a lot of people look at things like tips or gold. And the reality is gold isn't very well correlated to inflation. Tips aren't well correlated either. Equities are actually the best correlation to inflation. So if you expect inflation, it's a great time to buy equities. Cryptocurrencies have fallen to that category as well as a risk asset. So not only as a risk asset is it following equities in some areas, it also closely follows global M2 supply. And we see a very strong correlation between Bitcoin and global M2 monetary supply.
And we've been talking about Bitcoin, but I guess I should ask you about other stuff as well. We've seen Ethereum in particular catch a bid recently, sort of catching up with Bitcoin to some extent. So where are you spending your time these days?
You know, I'm spending most of my time in actually Bitcoin, but a lot of times in other cryptocurrencies as well, such as protocols. Not so much Ethereum, but some of the other newer ones that are fast and a little bit more efficient. So we're looking at things like SWI and XRP and HBAR. Those are some of the ones we're looking at. Litecoin is something that's very similar to Bitcoin that is gaining favor again, and we're a big fan of Litecoin at this point.
What do you do with this stuff that you can't do with Bitcoin?
Yeah, absolutely. And they're two very different things, right? So Bitcoin, I see it as a commodity, as money, and you use it for transactions. And in other countries, you do it a lot more, and here you do it some, but I use it for transactions all the time. Litecoin is very similar to Bitcoin, except it's faster, it's a little cheaper. It's almost like the silver to Bitcoin's gold, which is something what we like, and it's actually more usable in smaller transactions, if that makes sense. But all these other ones are protocols, and the way that I think about that is, if you have an iPhone, for instance, or any other kind of smartphone, you have all these different applications on there. And if you're playing games like Candy Crush and you run out of time, you have to buy more time, and you have an in-app currency that does that. So things like Ethereum I see that as kind of like an iPhone. It's got all these applications built on top of it, and you use ETH as a currency to power those transactions. So it's very different. It's a currency, not in the same way that Bitcoin is. Bitcoin's a currency more like the dollar is.
So it's almost purpose-built for
That's right.
whatever it's in. Another trend I want to ask you about is the Treasury trend. That is companies putting various cryptocurrencies on their balance sheet. Obviously, Strategy, aka formerly known as MicroStrategy, really pioneered that. Michael Novogratz of Galaxy Digital, who provides a lot of services to companies doing this, on his conference call yesterday said, I think we might have reached the peak of companies jumping on this trend for now.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're getting very close on that. And the reality is this is a good thing because companies can choose a currency like Bitcoin to hold, just like you hold foreign currency reserves as a company that transacts in other countries. With Bitcoin, it's almost like if you're transacting in the digital economy, this is a smart move to hold Bitcoin on your balance sheet in order for future transactions, to think about it like that.
But if you're an investor, do you think it is better to buy Bitcoin itself, spot Bitcoin ETF, a company that holds Bitcoin? I mean, isn't it best to just do it as directly as you can?
I agree. You know, I would rather own, if coming to Bitcoin, I'd rather own spot directly first, an ETF second, and then a treasury company third. And the issue with the treasury companies is they do trade at premiums. But what will happen is if Bitcoin really starts dropping in price, which it does every 4 years, and I expect it to happen in 2026, that as the price of Bitcoin drops, it might trigger some of the convertible notes and preferreds that they are issuing to buy the Bitcoin, which might cause them to forcibly sell the Bitcoin.
Right.
So anytime you have a leverage play, leverage works both ways, and we worry about that leverage.
So 2026, do you think that's when we're going to see the next more significant pullback?
I really do.
Okay, it does tend to happen on time, I guess, when it comes to Bitcoin. Steven, thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.